This video will cover how to make the popular Synthwave bass patch with the Micromoog and the Studio Electronics SE1. This is the first part. There will be a second video to cover how to make the patch with other analog synths. I was inspired to cover this because when I did a search on Synthwave bass tutorials, the results were only using software. It was as if one did a search on how to bake an apple pie, and the results only showed people baking Mrs. Smith's apple pies. So I'll cover how to get the Synthwave sound with the actual hardware. Here's some background about the Micromoog. Since the legendary Minimoog was rather expensive at the time, the Micromoog was produced in 1975 with a lower price for the gigging musician. But it's surprising that the list price of $695 at the time would be over $4,000 in today's money, so it was hardly cheap. I'll cover some basics. It's a single oscillator analog synth, but there's some tricks to fatten the sound. It actually has a feature not found on the Minimoog, a variable VCO. The oscillator allows continuous waveform blending from a sawtooth to a square wave. So I'll open the filter all the way up so you'll just hear the raw wave. Oh, I got pulse width on it. I got to turn the pulse width down. When I change the shape, you'll hear to change it. Okay, but I'll bring the knob up here to the middle position for the Synthwave bass. It also has a sub oscillator. Here's without it. And it brings a oscillator that doubles it an octave below. But since this patch doesn't use it, I'll just leave it at 0. And the real trick to getting a fat sound with this is the pulse width modulation. Here's the tone without modulation. Now I turn up the knob. That's too much. That's too much. So I have it just a little above halfway. And it actually sounds like there could be 2 oscillators to my ear, but it's actually just the pulse width modulation just makes it a big sound. To get the pulse width modulation, the routing has to be turned all the way clockwise to the waveform, and then the source has to be here at this waveform, and the rate I have at about just above 1 hertz, and I can change the rate of the pulse width with this knob. But I have it around here, just above 1 hertz. For the Synthwave bass patch, I have the filter cutoff set just below +3, something like this. But for the envelope, this doesn't have 4-stage envelopes like a Minimoog. So you have to use the contour amount, and I'll set this all the way counterclockwise for a fast attack. Now if I turn it the other direction, it's going to give you an attack that would be more like for brass. So you want it turned all the way counterclockwise. The filter contour attack is set to 400, and the release is also 400. And then the attack loudness contour, it should have a fast attack with a even sustain, and the release is about like 100 milliseconds. The release should be for a fast release. And then the oscillator should be set to normal. Filter mode is off. The filter mod by oscillator is off, and the filter mode is full. And then the last three switches are all the way turned to the left. And the resonance is set to 5. I don't know why Moog calls it emphasis. This is with a little more. But I don't really sound like the typical patch, so I have it a little bit just to the middle. And for the last thing, the glide should be set to 0. There's a trick playing this patch on the Micromoog. Because the instrument is monophonic, there's only one oscillator. You will need to play the patch staccato, lifting your finger from each key before you trigger the next note. Otherwise, it will sound like this. You need to lift your finger every time before you trigger the next note. I discovered the SE1 from the January 1994 review of the instrument. The reviewer compared the SE1 to his vintage Minimoog and concluded that tonally they are like two peas in a pod. In the late 1980s, Studio Electronics began taking parts from Model Ds and putting them in their MIDIs. The company added an important innovation to the SE1 that the MIDI lacked: the ability to store 200 patches in digital memory. So the SE1 is sort of a monophonic memory Moog. I've noticed how the oscillator select is more like the memory Moog. This is the Synthwave bass I programmed on the SE1. I'll open the filter all the way so you can hear the raw waveforms. The first oscillator is a pulse wave set to about 50%, and then the second and third oscillators are both saw waves. For the frequency of the oscillators, if I just turn one of these knobs, it'll go to the screen. So the first oscillator is 12 for an octave up. The second oscillator is 24, which is 2 octave ups. And then in oscillator 3 is also 12. Now, because of oscillator drift, I had to tune the main to plus 16 to have A equal 440 Hertz. And then I detuned the two second and third oscillators. The second oscillator is plus 20 and the third oscillator is plus 8. The filter is all the way open now. So I closed it for the Synthwave bass to about 2 o'clock for like that. The resonance is around 4, and then the tracking is all the way set to 0. And then for the envelope emittance, all these settings for all three knobs is set to 6. For the oscillator envelopes, the attack should be fast with a long sustain like an organ, and the release can be experimented with. I have it below 250 milliseconds. I can raise it and you can hear how it may want something like that, but I had it around here. The filter attack should be set all the way counterclockwise. Now the K is really the sweet spot. I have it just below 250 milliseconds, like this. But if you make it longer, you can hear how it changes it drastically. And then the sustain I have set to just above, just below 3. And then the release is also about what it was for the release of the oscillators, just below 250 milliseconds. One last thing, the decibels of the filter should be, this should be lit for a 24 decibel cut. If you leave it unlit, it's going to be the Outrun filter, and it's going to make a big difference. So this is with the Outrun filter, and this is with the Moog filter. So I like the Moog filter much more. This synth sounds great, and the patch memory is a great help. Honestly, it's a pain not being able to save patches with an instrument that's completely analog. I end up taking pictures of my patch settings on the Micromoog, so these instruments should be valued more than $1,000. Although the settings were made on an SE1, it should be easy to apply this method to the original Model D Moog. I made samples of these patches, and I'm looking into making a Synthwave library for Contact. The next video will cover making these patches on the Chord Trident and the Outrun Matrix 6. Until next time, take care.